Hey everybody, if you want more information on future podcasts, go to James's website at innatechoice.com. On that website, you're also going to find some of the science, some of the research, and a ton of great resources to help you become the wellness solution in your practice. If you want to join us for the live seminar, you can come to the Best Practices seminar by also going to innatechoice.com.
So listen, if you want to sign up for this podcast, if you want to get, notifications of when the new one's coming out and all the other great resources that Brad has, go to levelupmentoring.rocks. You can also register for the upcoming best practices seminars there. And again, it's levelupmentoring.rocks.
The Best Practices live seminar will be James, Chestnut, and I teaching side by side. The Chiro-Factor Podcast will be dropping complimentary on a monthly basis. You can register for both at innatechoice.com or levelupmentoring.rocks. James and I are thrilled to share cutting-edge current information to help chiropractors get their swagger back. And cheers to those of you listening all the way through to the end. These are the kind of docs we want to help. People who have the best interest for their patients, the best interest in the science for results, and we want to help you with the profitability of your practice as well. We'll see you there at the Best Practices live workshop, or you can listen to us monthly at the Chiro-Factor Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Chiro-Factor. I'm excited because, as always, I am joined by Dr. James Chestnut. Thanks for doing this, my man.
Always good to be together.
Right on. So I just got done going to Australia and doing a couple workshops down there. And, it's funny how many people in the room are craving the next episode of this podcast. So I just got to tip the cap and just say, well done. I know we did a sample of one just to see how it was going to go. But it's been so helpful for chiropractors. So thanks for always making the time to do this and for sharing freely with the profession.
Always a pleasure, Brad. And thanks to you as well. You're a good organizer.
My man. So I want to
do a good job.
Well, what's fun is just, kind of wrangling you in, and then people now recognize my job here is to fire you up a little bit. So
yeah, it's nice that we have the sort of, we talk about it all the time, but I think we bring two very important perspectives into helping doctors be successful. One is that they need to be educated and they need to be evidence-based, and they also need to be phenomenal clinicians and business people.
Yeah.
And so if you can't do all of those together, and they're in an indissoluble union, as we always say, but the reality is you and I both have one goal, and that is to make highly successful chiropractors who have businesses or practices that provide a tremendous benefit to their clients or patients. And so, I think we're succeeding.
Totally.
The feedback is that whether it's the podcasts or the seminars or a combination of both, the truth is that, the feedback has been that our outcome goal is being met.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's why we'll continue to do it. Neither of us need attention or, fillers for our busy days. We did this for one reason when we started, and that was we had a very specific outcome, which was that we wanted to increase the success of the chiropractor's business and the success of their clinical encounters for the patients. And I think we're doing both. So totally. I'm immensely proud of the feedback we've gotten.
And I was just teaching Australia just to get it firsthand. People are like, thank you guys for doing that. And, did a couple of workshops and everybody queues up and shakes your hand or gives you hugs. And it was really a lot of it was about what we're doing here. And then, I was teaching my Elements workshop, which is the day one report of findings. And we had people going, this stuff, weaves in seamlessly how we do the Chestnut spinal health assessment, how we do the progress exams, how we're sharing and teaching subluxation-based care. And people were told in chiropractic schools that it didn't exist or we didn't have the science. And then, unfortunately, it just gets echoed. A lot of chiropractic students just echo what they hear. And I go, wait a minute, and one of the things I learned from you that I'd love to illustrate is there's never going to be a double-blind peer-reviewed research on the adjustment.
can't be. You can't blind the practitioner. So unless you get a robot to do it, which would be, I guarantee you, if you got a robot to adjust or manipulate, you would see some enormous benefit. It wouldn't be the same,
Right.
but the fact is there is a mechanical component to it that you could probably mimic, but it'll never happen. But yeah, and I always I was having a discussion actually with a chiropractor. It was interesting, but he was all hung up on the term subluxation, and I just said, can I diffuse that for you for a second? I said, because I know you got all these negative connotations to it, and you don't even know how to define it, but I don't want to get in an argument about it. But at the end of the day, what if I said adjustment-centric?
Right.
And I said, now can I get your attention and talk about the evidence?
Right.
And he's like, or I even said, and you can use the term manipulation if you like. I don't care.
Right.
But at the end of the day, most thing that you need to do is figure out how to get people to be focused on the most evidence-based intervention, the most unique intervention to us, the thing that is our birthright to own, which is, the adjustment.
Yeah.
And so, and then after that discussion, I always say, well, what is it that you're adjusting, jackass?
Right.
And then they'll say, well, dysfunction. I'll go, okay, define it. Then you get to the point where you're like, well, actually, I guess you're adjusting a subluxation, something that's not moving properly, and that's changed the afferent neurology, which changes the efferent neurology, which changes the brain function, all this stuff. And then, because once people admit that, understand that that the adjustment is about restoring motion and neurology, then they have to admit there's a change to motion and neurology. Otherwise, they wouldn't need an adjustment. There would be no clinical indicator for it. Now we're all on the same page. So I just wish we could just get rid of this.
I love it. But in about 60 seconds, you just cleared up so many battle lines and war zones. It's just like,
These people are fighting over shit they don't understand. And it's just like,
well, dysfunction in the spine, when it's moved and adjusted, has a whole different impact than if you're moving segments that are already moving, right? And that's something we've talked about.
Interesting. That just came out, that Niazi study, first ever, that basically showed that if you adjust a non-relevant joint, meaning it doesn't have any clinical findings of subluxation, restriction, and tenderness, it doesn't have the same impact on the sensory motor cortex as if you adjust one that does. That's huge. So
that's huge. What study was that?
Niazi, 2025, I believe. Heidi was the group out of New Zealand, but they did it.
Yeah. So the idea that, if it's a restricted segment, call it whatever you want, and you get it moving, it has more of an impact on the brain than if you're moving segments. In other words, they're not dysfunctional. They're already moving, and you apply an impact. So said differently, a specific adjustment has the greatest impact. And so it comes back to this idea that we are centrally
segmentally specific adjustment.
Segmentally specific.
All these vectors, all these different techniques want to draw. Don't yell at me, everybody. But I'm just saying, I just want to be careful. So what we're saying is, yes, there's no doubt that a segmentally specific adjustment aimed at a segment with clinical indicators of subluxation, restriction, and tenderness has a much greater impact. And the reason it has an impact is because that subluxated or dysfunctional joint has had an impact on the central nervous system, specifically the areas of the brain, sensory motor cortex, and many other areas prior to getting that adjustment. So in other words, there has been a physiological detriment to that human being because of that subluxation that has occurred, and that's why adjusting that subluxation is more impactful than adjusting the segment that has no clinical findings, because a segment that's normally moving has had no negative impact on that human experience or physiology.
And I know we're going to shift gears here in a little bit and start talking about the GLP-1s and Ozempic and some of that stuff, but physiologically detrimental. Can we just go back to that? Because, man, I knew if we talked around this topic just a little bit in the beginning, I want to keep it adjustment-centric just in the beginning. And can you just talk around that topic a little bit more? Because that's like the freaking bullseye. If it's been physiologically detrimental to have this dysfunction, it makes perfect sense to me that the inverse would be true upon a segmentally specific adjustment to those restricted areas. Can you just kind of highlight that one more time for me?
Yeah, and so just so everyone, all the straights can calm down.
You said all the straights can calm down. We know exactly who's going to be heated about this.
So, but what I'm saying is the fact that it's not moving means it's also affected the neurology and affected the brain and affected the autonomic. Like all these things are in an indissoluble union. Our window's the one, because we find it because it's not moving and it's restricted and it's tender. But the reason it's restricted and tender, or the physiological consequences of that restricted tender joint are certainly neurological.
Yeah.
But our window into it to find the clinically relevant segment is through motion, through palpation, restriction, and tenderness. And our way to improve it is through reinstilling motion. We don't directly figure out how much nerve stimulation should go through the afferent fibers. And that's not what we do. We don't have that ability. What we have the ability to do is restore normal, which is mobility.
Right.
And once that mobility is restored, the neurology gets restored. Once the neurology is restored, the brain function is restored. Once the brain function is restored, the neuromuscular function and all the autonomic stuff gets restored. So, just so everyone understands, the physiological consequences of a subluxated or restricted tender segment are vast.
Yeah.
And that's the argument I always like to get to.
Yeah.
I don't want to argue terms. I don't want to argue philosophy. I don't want to argue any of that bullshit. I want to argue what is happening neurophysiologically when a segment is restricted and can't move. And why does it become tender? Because it's restricted.
Right.
And it has scar tissue, it has inflammation, and it has reduced proprioception, increased nociception. What does that mean neurophysiologically? Once you can understand that, now you can start to understand the importance of a chiropractic adjustment. Calling it a manipulation doesn't change the importance of it, you jackass.
Right. And I had some students asking, why in some of the scientific articles don't they call it a subluxation, or why have they interchanged manipulation for adjustment? I said, look, for some of the publications and the wording that they're using, it fits wherever it's coming from. But if you're hung up on those terms and they didn't exactly say, scientifically specific adjustment, instead they said manipulation, I'm like, you're going to miss the bigger picture here. Bringing it back to what we do differently is what's important. And just to kind of highlight what you were saying there is a way to teach this to patients and go through it. And so, again, I was just down teaching in Australia. And I was talking through the Chestnut Spinal Health Assessment for the day one. And the workshop I was teaching is the elements of closing. So the elements workshop, and you've been to that. The day one, we load up the value. And we do it so differently, I think, than what's being taught for decades in our profession, in that we're really going to build value on the day one, so that as we go through the care, you can cross things off, you can show the progress, you have illustrations. I'm very conscientious of visual, auditory, kinesthetic. And so some of the things that we were doing on the day one with the anhedonia, the touch and tell, people said, why are you so concerned with collecting this and that grade of detail? I said, because I'm going to need it later. Mm-hmm. And this is the part I wish chiropractors understood with the practice management side, is like, where you're going to take the patient. You know the journey you're going to put them on. Why would you act surprised when you get to the progress exams and you don't have things there to work with? You don't have the content that you need to show them. And now we're left to how the patient feels, even though on the onset of the care plan, we said, basing your health on how you feel or how you look are two of the biggest misleading health factors. And I say it in all my health classes. That's how people decide if they're healthy, how they look and how they feel. And we have drugs and plastic surgery to alter both. So they're not good indicators. And yet, if we don't do the exam right the day one, then the report of findings is hard work, and you have to do hard sales, which I hate.
Proper data to start. How do you show progress in spinal health if you've never measured spinal health? What's the single greatest, most valid measure of spinal health? Segmental motion.
That's right.
Restriction and anhedonia, segmental. So if you're not measuring their state of spinal health, how could you ever show that you've improved it?
That's it.
Doesn't make any sense.
And then the flip side of that, and what we teach at the Elements Workshop, is how to put it into their language. Like, what's their currency? And I think for the listeners, that's valuable. It's like, what's their currency? And then to tie in what you were just talking about, the neurophysiological detriment to the patient, it isn't really the pain that they're there. It's what it disconnects them from. And so I've got to tap into their currency. Are they a golfer? Are they a parent? Is it a CEO and its CEO functions? And there's a way to do that where you can show value in their language through the care plan. And then you've helped us illustrate it, with the Chestnut Spinal Health Assessment. And so as we laid it out, people were like, oh, you're basically building evidence and a case for your care as you go through the care. And I said, well, yeah, why would you act surprised as you get through your care plan, you have nothing else to show them, teach them, administer that there's been some progress going through this. It's crazy to me. So one more time, I just want to kind of like highlight the work that we're doing here. I think is really cool because it comes back to adjustment-centric. And then something you said in the previous podcast, I wanted to double click on, which was the Therapeutic Working Alliance. And in the Therapeutic Working Alliance, docs, there's 3 things here, and then we're going to kind of shift gears. But one of the things is goal agreement. Will you talk about that? Because there's 3 things for patient satisfaction. It's goal agreement, intervention agreement, and then the bonded trust. Will you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, and those are that's not just for chiropractic. That's for all interventions, right? And we're the ones who are best at doing it, by the way,
right,
by far. But yeah, so in other words, the goal agreement is that you and your patient have to both decide what they want. Now, the interesting thing is that their goal agreement might be, I want to play tennis or whatever else. But so your job is to then say, well, in order to reach your goal, my goal has to be to get your spine moving and have you, return you to a state of health and function. Because without a state of health and function, you can't reach your goal. So my goal is for you to reach your goal. But in order for us to do that, my goal is going to be neurophysiological, clinical, and your goal is going to be experiential lifestyle, like right, quality of life. Right. And so, and again, their goal might be, I want to be out of pain. And you're very, very good at this, Brad. He's like, well, why do you want to be out of pain? And that's really important to tie those things in.
Right. And I think a good word to tie those 2 things together before we jump on to the next point is the word because. So just to use your example, okay, you want to play tennis, you want to get moving better, you want to be out there and be able to play 3 sets, and you're having a hard time even going to tennis lessons right now or warming up. Because you want to do those things, the care plan I'm going to recommend is this. So what you do is you really build up what they want, but you have to be a better listener than talker. And that's the part that, our report of findings is 12 minutes. Could I get it done in 3 minutes? Yeah. But the reason I take 12 is it's a relationship report of findings. I'm gathering data and information points in the day one I know I'm going to use later, one of which is your tool and the spinal health assessment so I can show them later. So that's one of the tools, but I know where I want to go with that. And if I let them build up their goals, their inspiration enough for wanting to be better, I can use the word because you want to play tennis. What we're going to need to do is see you 3 times a week. What you're going to need to do is commit to a care plan of X amount of time, whatever that is. And so when you throw them enough rope and they build up their reasons for doing it, then we get beyond the pain. The pain's just the inconvenience. Because this is what your goals are, these are my recommendations. And I love, you and I have talked about this, the best practices. You're not selling somebody in the report of findings if you do it right. What you're creating are clinical recommendations.
Correct. And their clinical recommendations to allow the patient to get what they want, not for you to get what you want.
Huge.
You're based on what you've told me you want, and based on what my exam shows me you need. Here's where we get into this. And the other thing that I think is important to remember with this, Brad, is that it's evolutionary in the sense that someone who's in dire pain, they might not have other goals other than just to get out of pain and be able to live their life. But as they get out of pain, you can actually lead them towards something which they never thought was possible, which was once we resolve that horrible discomfort, what other things are you going to add to your life that you miss because you can't do it? So each time you go through, the goals can get bigger.
Right.
So you meet them where they're at, but you not only do you sort of help them with that primary maybe goal, but remember that, when you're in dire pain, you can't get out of, can barely walk around.
That's all you can think about.
Because your abilities are limited. But as your ability increases, so do your goals. It's a fantastic journey that we can take these people on.
Yeah.
But only if they're under a proper amount of care for a proper amount of time.
That's it. So it's goal agreement, intervention agreement, and then that bonded trust. Right.
Yeah. The intervention should be based on 2 things, what their goals are, but what you decide as the expert clinician of what is required in terms of care to reach those goals.
Yeah. I mean, as we teach this, and you've done the elements of closing workshop a couple times yourself, we always say the most important thing we're ever going to do in here is the adjustment. In the next phase of care, the most important thing we're going to do in here is the adjustment. And we hammer that. The 3rd phase, we're going to do the most important thing is the adjustment. I mean, it's like you can't miss it, right? And so what I love about that is that
it's the most important thing.
That's right. And then we can wind your wellness care back into the adjustment. Then you don't hear, well, is that all I'm going to get? Or is that it for today? Or am I only getting adjusted? No, that's what you need, right? So your ongoing care, then you can kind of melt away all the other things that you have the patient doing at home or for their home care and say, this is what we're going to do in here. It's just the adjustment. And then the rest of it you can do outside of here, which is why you can do quicker visits and see a higher volume. Is when the pain goes away and the patient doesn't, then I think you've arrived, right? When the patient is there for the chiropractic, not the chiropractor, now you've got a business because you don't have to be there. You're not trapped. So I think that's huge. And then the goal agreement, intervention agreement, and then that bonded trust. I know you and I have talked a little bit about this before, but I just love this. And I shared this recently, and I gave you credit for talking about the Therapeutic Working Alliance at a seminar. I said, look, I learned this from Chestnut, but it's worth sharing throughout the profession because we do this better than anybody. Will you talk a little bit about, just that bonded trust, the daily visit? I know we've shared ideas that, your table talk isn't a health class. Just kind of click on that, because in Australia, that seemed to really strike a chord with a lot of the docs, the conversations we've shared in the past, and I promised them we would expand on that.
Yeah, so the bonded trust is based on being trustworthy, first and foremost, have integrity. And so if you can't be cowardly and say, I don't want to recommend that much care because people might not like it. Or I heard a professor one time who knows nothing, say that it's X or Y. The bottom line is you need to have the evidence to know what the research or what the best available research shows is required to give them the best possible statistical chance to get better. So, and you and I have gone over this many, many times, but the reality, they need more care than you think, not less. And then once you have that bond of trust, the other thing I always think is great is that when you're recommending things that are outside of your care as well, whether it be the nutrients, or I know you use, just simple things they can do at home, exercises, whatever it is, right? That creates trust, because what it shows the patient is that you're recognizing that you're helping them do things on their own to help them get better.
That's right.
That's enormous.
Yeah.
When they feel like you're giving them advice, expert adjustment care, but also advice that allows them to get the most out of the care, and be a fast responder and get that also develops trust. So first of all, doing a very thorough exam, giving a very good report, explaining it in detail, sticking to what you said, remeasuring what you measured at the beginning because you're showing progress on that, and then becoming a practitioner which they realize has their best interest in mind. And that really is trust. Trust is when they feel and experience that you have their best interest in mind. Yeah. And that is the foundation of trust in any relationship, by the way, not just with a patient.
And just to maybe plus that great idea and do one step further, just because you do 7 different tests or 5 different tests, it isn't that more tests equals more better. More tests is more results. The truth is there's the law of averages. So as you do 7 different tests, they average all of them. So what I would emphasize for docs listening is pick the most influential, pick the most, illustrations that benefit what you're doing. And then you can move into the other tests later. But just doing 7 tests on your initial exam and having to do those for the re-exams or the progress exams, you wind up butting up against what's called the law of averages. More isn't more better. It's just they take the averages. So if we're specific with it, then actually it's going to build your authority and your credibility. And that's, again, why...
tests, right? So maybe what we should do is the tests that are shown to be most valid and provide the most valid, trustworthy information to the patient, because you should only be doing tests that are valid and reliable, because that means that you're going to provide information to the patient that's valid and reliable. So
and it's a essentialism concept, right? Like only show them what's going to be valid and reliable. Only show them the best testing. I knew you would like that soundbite. And when I was sharing it with the Australians, they're like, oh, so wait a minute. Instead of doing 7 tests, you're saying, I'm like, exactly. Instead of diluting your message, concentrate it and deliver on the things that are coinciding with what we're talking about. And then that really becomes a bonded trust. And I've always said that trust is the currency of the future, right? So how you leverage that into the future, I think, is huge. We've been doing Table Talk. I've got a program out right now I want docs to know about called Table Talk for Referrals. The first faculty I interviewed and guest was you. And honestly, you can generate referrals from your Table Talk when you do this stuff right. And that's based on the bedrock of trust. So if you want to check it out, levelupmentoring.rocks is our website, and it's called Table Talk for Referrals. Within the title, it speaks for itself, one referral page for the program. But what's cool is we've got the science and the research that we dive into the adjustment. So how to tie those two things together, I think, is huge. Couple housekeeping, if I can go through this, James, real quick, for 2027. You okay if we talk about some tentative dates for docs to save?
Yeah, point to make on those tests if I can, just real quick.
Yeah, Brad, please.
One is, the goal of an exam isn't to try and find something you can use to convince the patient to come under your care. That's not the goal of an exam.
Say that again, because that's big.
Okay, so the goal of an exam isn't to try and find something that you can use to convince the patient to purchase your care. That's not the goal of an exam. The goal of an exam is, from a doctors, is to find out whether or not the patient needs your care. And if they do, then you can then use the evidence to say, well, how much care is it likely that they need, and use that to create a report of findings. But the idea of an exam isn't to try and turn everybody into a patient. Mm-hmm. The goal of an exam is to find out whether or not this person could benefit from being a patient.
Yeah.
And so I think docs get they get, because they don't understand what the valid tests are, they're just searching for anything to be able to get patients to sign on the bottom line, and that's not integrity, and that's not trust. So what you're trying to do is determine whether or not this client has clinical indication for chiropractic adjustment.
Love it.
So those, which tests are those? Well, turns out it's going to be, restriction, tenderness, basically the most valid and reliable according to everybody. So
restriction and tenderness, in case they didn't hear it.
Spinal health assessment, that's why I created it, was just but the whole point is that, yes, there's other things you can do, but at the end of the day, what you're trying to find out is whether or not this patient is a candidate for, do they have clinical indications and no contraindications for chiropractic adjustment. That's the goal of the exam.
That's it.
The goal of the report is then to take that information and provide it in a way which Brad is so good at making them understand that they're a candidate for chiropractic care and that they're very likely to benefit from it, and it's a wise decision to invest in. But let's stop this idea of we're always trying to find a new way to convince people.
That's right.
To get care. That's not what we're about.
And when you do 7 different tests, it's almost like you're throwing the kitchen sink because you're hoping something sticks. And again, you're up against the law of averages. The more you throw in there, you actually bring down your credibility. Just stick with the 1 or 2 things that are the best for that. I'm going to kind of take this a step further because I love when we riffed on this stuff. One is you use the word if. And I just hammered this at my most recent workshop. I was like, the whole point is to see if you're a candidate, to see if we can help you out, to see if you would benefit from the care that I do in my practice, which could be different than another chiropractor in another town. So I just want to see if. So I made everybody write the word if down. And then the thing that I think will help our listeners as well is I said, you don't have to give any answers on the first visit. If you're doing this right, you don't have to give any answers. And I could hear like the collective sigh in the room. And then sure enough, somebody asked the question, well, what if they say, and I'm like, you don't have to give an answer. The next question, well, let's hypothetically say the patient, I go, you don't have to give an answer. On the day one, you don't have to give any answers. And that should take the pressure off. At the report of findings, I'll tell you what I found. Step 1 is if I can help you. 2 is let me defer all of this, think about it. And then at the report of findings, I can tell you all of that stuff. But it also builds tension between the day one and the ROF, which means we don't have a problem for people showing up to the ROF. We're like 99.9%. And somebody asked that this weekend too, like, what percentage of your people show up to the ROF? I'm like, everybody. That's not, because I don't answer anything on the day one. It's an if statement all the way through. What do you think it is, Doc? How long do you think it's going to take, Doc? I don't know. I'm just finding out. I'm just collecting the info. I'm not really sure until I sit and look at this.
And the cool thing about that is, if they're using the spinal health assessment, is they have all this data collected, and then they send the patient home with that report to read in between day 1 and day 2. So if they have all these questions, guess what they're going to do? Right. They're going to read that report. And if they read that report, you're not going to read it to them, I always say it, but if they read that report, you've already won.
And my number one nightmare patient, just to be really clear for the listeners, we like to get candid on these conversations, is the hyper-analytical. Hyper-analytical person is the one that's going to read that report, problem solved. Like for me, I'm not going to sit there and go toe to toe. And
you're just going to look at the picture of their subluxation findings, right? So it's perfect for everybody. The ones who are analytical are going to read the whole thing.
Yeah.
The other ones are going to go right to the page, because you pre-frame them as you talk about. I hope we don't see red, and they're going to go right to that page, and then they're going to have expectations about okay, now they know there's something's been found. Now they can't wait for the report to find out what to do about it. It works for all of them. The analytical read it. The non-analyticals look at the pictures.
That's it.
Brad, everybody knows which ones you and I are.
That's right. Yeah. And totally. We represent both parties. Yeah. That's the full brain that we have collectively, right? Because each one of us has half a brain. So here's the thing too about that is we look at both at their progress exams, at their re-examinations. I stack up all the evidence in the communication side of it about their currency. Okay, you want to play tennis, and how much tennis do you want to play, and what do you have going on? So I'm going to go through that in the re-exam communication-wise. And then the science side of it is illustrating that the subluxation has been reduced. So you get both. You get their language, and you can show them your language. So again, the word I used was because you want to play more tennis, these are my recommendations. That becomes a theme at the re-exams, so that you actually build steam through the care plan. When you build steam through the care plan, then you have the ability to step out of your practice because you have asymptomatic patients coming in who just want to be adjusted. And so really the benefit, like we're coming into the summer here in the Northern Hemisphere, I basically filled up my practice with 100 new patients last month. We signed up a bunch of people to care plans. Most of them are 90-day care plans, not everybody. But now for the next 90 days, I can blow out of town. In the summer, my associate's going to take care of them. And I basically got 90 days to do what I need to do for lacrosse, for trips, for travel, all that stuff. And it's like, it's nothing to do with, what's best for the doctor. It's always what's best for the patient. And you build momentum through the care plan. So you should have a higher percentage of people signing up for the wellness care than even their initial care because of how we do these re-exams, the communication of their language, their goals. Look, if you haven't done the Elements of Closing workshop, just do it. You have to do it because so much of what James and I talk about, it's weaved in, and then you just follow the recipe. Please don't ever use the word supplements when we're talking about the Chestnut essential nutrients. Those are two different things. So don't say supplements. These are essential nutrients. And all of this recipe kind of gets baked together. And it's just been fun teaching it. So a couple dates that we will be together just for people to save it. One is Scotland in 2027. So for 2026, we got nothing on the docket. But 2027, Scotland, it's going to be the weekend of March the 6th. And if you guessed, there might be some rugby going on. Toronto, Canada, save the weekend of May the 1st, 2027. These are all 27 dates. And then Sydney, Australia, October 22nd weekend. That is of 2027 as well. So Scotland, March 7th, Toronto, May 1st, Sydney, Australia, October 22nd weekend of 2027. Details will come out, but I know some of you are big time planners, so save those dates, and we will let you know what's cooking. If you haven't done so yet, go to the InnateChoice.com website. That's where you get the essential nutrients and, dare I say, the probiotics. We had a concussed patient recently that wasn't doing the probiotics. We got him on your stuff about a month ago, and the brain fog cleared up. The gut-to-brain connection is one of the first in embryology. It's primitive, it's primal, and everybody else is catching up, but Chestnut's been talking about this for 20 years. And to me, I just think that's super simple. If you want to do our Table Talk for referrals program, that is levelupmentoring.rocks, and that's basically how to do your table talk based on the science, the research, so it generates new patients. Most docs doing this are getting 3 and 4 new patients in the first shift, and basically it's meant to be run once a month. So it's really cool. We got some cool stuff. The faculty is amazing. It's some of the veterans in chiropractic giving you the best sound bites, their regular day conversations. But then, of course, we switch it into referrals. So as we wrap up the announcements, that's everything I got here. We are going to shift gears and get into a deep science conversation on the GLP-1s, specifically the topic of Ozempic. And Chestnut has done some homework on this one. So as we ramp up to do this, I just want to say there are many factors in health. We know oftentimes the X factor, it's the Chiro-Factor. Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm excited because we have had Chestnut in the lab for the last 2 weeks doing research, putting his head down on a topic that he and I have been pretty fired up about in the past. And I oftentimes hear chiropractic doctors say patients don't have the money or the economy's tough or things are tight. And I think when we go through these GLP-1s, some of the cost, you'll realize that people are spending well over $1,000 a month all year long on these weight loss drugs. The side effects are horrendous. And yet at the same time, most of you have care that's going to be less than $1,000 a month for what people truly need. So we're going to jump into a topic that's loaded with stats, data, and information. And there's nobody better in my mind to go through this, deconstruct it, point out the flaws than Dr. James Chestnut. So James, we are talking about GLP-1s, things like Ozempic. I'm going to tee it up and turn you off the leash because our fans, I think, are most excited when you're a little pissed off. How you feeling right now?
I think everyone should be a little bit pissed off with this. But so just to give people an idea, there's 100 million obese U.S. adults.
Wow.
And that's not including kids, by the way. So that's the potential. Those are people right now who are indicated for GLP-1s. 100 million adults, not including the kids who they're already giving GLP-1s to, as everybody knows. The average cost of that is about $12,000 to $16,000 a year, $1,000 to $1,500 a month. So there's 100 million right now. I think, let me just check the number so I make sure I get it right. There are 15 million Americans on it, and they're spending $70 billion a year.
15 million Americans, $70 billion.
And there's another 85 million already indicated for the drug, so that it's covered. I should say it's all covered, but they're clinically indicated to get it because they're obese, right? That's it. By the way, you can, like, diabetes and obesity are both, so very few people are diabetic without being obese, but it doesn't mean that it's not possible. So they project that if just the people who right now are eligible for GLP-1s and who should be, according to the so-called experts recommended for it, it would be trillions of dollars per year. Trillions of dollars per year. By the way, that would suck out all the money from every other problem.
We've talked about this in the podcast before, but when money's allocated for something like the GLP-1s, it's coming from a place, which means something else in healthcare is going to be deficient or underfunded. Is that fair to say?
So you've got a pie, and you've got this much money that comes from insurance, or this much money. So what's happening, by the way, in the socialized places, and by the way, a lot of this is why they fight so hard to get it onto Medicare and Medicaid, because when that happens, governments just print money to pay for it. Right. It doesn't come out of a fixed pie. So in a real world, there's so much money that a health insurance company takes in every year. Let's say it's $100 million just for fun. And out of that $100 million, they have to allocate that, but they can't allocate more than $100 million. And in fact, what we know is that insurance companies are highly profitable. So if they take in $100 million, they're going to allocate $50 million and take $50 million in profit. That's generally how it goes. And you could just look that up if you like. And then all the hospital administrators, all the doctors have to get paid. Like, all the money that comes in there, all these people have to get paid first. And then the money goes towards, caring for the patients. And the care for the patients, of course, is horrendous. It makes them sicker, which brings them back the next year to cost more money. It's incredible. But for anything that's covered by the government, what happens is the government just prints money to pay for it because there's not enough money. How are you going to pay for 100 million people to go on GLP-1 drugs? Do you think that means they're not costing the system with any other parts of their illness, or any other drug treatments, or any other hospital stays, or any other stuff, like just the side effects alone, which we'll talk about? So it's impossible to pay for this bullshit. It's impossible to pay for this. It's impossible. So I just did something really fun. I'm going to talk about it later, but I just got on and I did some AI searches on, what would happen instead of GLP-1 drugs if you actually paid for people to have subsidized healthy food and personal trainers. What would be cheaper? Well, personal trainers and subsidized healthy food would be way cheaper than Wegovy. It would be way more better. And I said, what would have better public health benefits and individual health benefits? There's no question, says AI, would 100% be lifestyle. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And I said, okay, why isn't that being done? AI says, well, because there's so much money and so much lobbying in drugs, right, and medical doctors aren't educated in it, and they're pushed towards drugs, and the whole system's polluted. But there's absolutely no doubt that the only solution to this, and the only thing to prevent anything and actually get people healthy, is to use lifestyle. And so I just encourage everybody, just AI that.
AI that.
Yeah.
Chestnut's pulling the AI button because chiropractic.
I go into the peer reviewed literature, but I'm psycho. So most people aren't going to do what I do. They're not going to go read the articles. They're not going to go do the literature review that I do. I understand that.
Right.
I check AI. So if AI says something that I don't already haven't already checked out, then I check AI. I've argued with AI many times and won, by the way.
And I've seen you arguing with AI.
Yeah, but my point is that that AI is phenomenal at answering very specific questions that you put out there in some ways. Now it can be biased, no doubt about it. But what I like about the reason I checked it and the reason I did the AI check first is because I wanted to make sure that it was accurate.
Right.
Now, depending on how you ask the question, what question you ask, you might get the industry bullshit about, oh, there's a few side effects, but it's great. Oh,
yeah, the prompt is really important.
Very important.
Yeah.
And so, like I do in research, I tell people the question is everything. But that's also true with AI, just so you know, the question is everything. But I want you to know, I've checked this, and I'll go over even the very specific questions I ask if you want to mimic those questions. And what you'll find out is that the truth is out there. They as I've been telling you for 20-something years, we already know the data.
Right.
We already know drugs don't work. We already know drugs work to change a score. They don't work to get sick people well, and they don't work to prevent illness, and they don't prolong life. It's all bullshit. But they do work to change obesity. GLP-1 drugs will reduce obesity. And if you reduce obesity, there's some other down the road benefits to that. There's no doubt about it. But there's an enormous cost, which I want to talk about.
And just to kind of highlight what you were talking about a minute ago with insurance companies, for docs outside of the U.S., oftentimes they don't know this, but these are real numbers from United Healthcare. United Healthcare last quarter posted $6.2 billion in profits last quarter, while simultaneously denying 32% of all authorization claims. So $6.2 billion in profits, and they denied 1 in 3 claims. They collect your premium and they pay back less. That's how the game works. They collect a premium and then they pay out less than what they collected. No matter what it is, no matter what they deny, they always win.
And guess where the battle is? The battle is at the lobby.
Right.
So what you'll find out is, this company from Denmark that makes Ozempic.
It's Novartis or something like that?
Yeah, Novartis or Novartis.
Novartis, yeah.
Well, they don't spend any time lobbying anywhere except the United States. They spent hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars lobbying the United States, right? Because they know if it happens in the United States, other countries will follow anyway. But they're lobbying to try and make sure that those 30% of those claims that are denied aren't them. And what they've done is they've argued and said, if you use GLP-1 drugs, you'll save money on the other drugs. And so this is why you should put all your money into the GLP-1 drugs. And they've spent an enormous amount of time lobbying, and they got it into Medicare, Medicaid, right? And they know that's the gold mine.
That's the gold mine.
Yeah, even if they run out of money, the government will just print it to pay for it. They get it into New Zealand, Canada, Australia, which is government healthcare, right? It's socialized healthcare. It means that they're not picking out of the pie and having to fight against these other diseases for a piece of the pie. The government will just print more money to put more people on GLP-1.
It's a lottery ticket. It's a guaranteed lottery ticket.
And then down the road, when the side effects come, which they're already here, there's already lawsuits in place. They've made so much money, it doesn't matter.
Right.
That it's like the Ford Pinto. I always say, they knew that if you got a certain number of people got rear-ended in a Ford Pinto, they were going to burn up and die with them and their children. And they asked themselves, how much are we going to pay for burnt up families? And the answer was less than it would cost us to recall all the cars. Look it up.
Crazy.
These people, they don't think like us, right? They're diabolical. There's a cost to everything. And so,
and we had a good conversation last podcast with Gerald Posner, who, a previous attorney and now great researcher, and, wrote about the pharmaceutical industry. So if people didn't listen, go back and listen to that. But I got so many good comments from docs, just like it was fun to watch Chestnut get excited with someone else revving them up, because they just don't think like we think. And it's just a cost of doing business. When there's death and carnage and families being destroyed, to them, it's just a cost of doing business. When easily they could have, followed the recipe of eat well, move well, think well. And again, Chiropractic has been right again and again and
Always.
again.
Chiropractic lifestyle from the beginning.
Totally.
Right?
Now, one of the known side effects of these GLP-1s is blindness. Am I right about that?
Yeah, there's a neuropathy that like it's endothelial damage, and yes, it is. And so, first of all, they deny what happened. They denied the thyroid cancer. They denied the muscle wasting. Like if you look up, like if you go back into the early when these drugs first came out, they said, "Oh, not enough evidence, not enough evidence." Now they're saying, "Oh, yeah." Now they actually have a drug for ass wasting. They literally have a drug that they brought out. First, they denied there was muscle wasting.
What's it for?
It's for ass muscle wasting. So they're saying if you get,
you had to add the muscle word in there. I think the first thing you said was ass wasting.
It's ass wasting. So you know how you get Ozempic face? You get Ozempic ass.
Oh,
and so what they're saying is because that's the biggest muscle in your body is the glute max, right?
Right.
And so that's where the muscle wasting occurs. And so they're now actually have a drug out to help prevent ass wasting.
No way.
And a drug which they said, by the way, didn't cause muscle wasting to start, but now they have to admit that it does. So now they have another drug to try to prevent,
That's is that new drug called like the Brazilian Bunda lift or something like that?
My jaw dropped.
Ass wasting. That is great. I mean, there's some communities that could use some ass wasting, get rid of some asses.
Yeah. But you don't want to lose the muscle out of your,
Right.
buttocks or your glute. But
All
anyway.
right. So let's get into this. Talk me through this whole mess and what's going on.
Okay.
They get it
So
lobbied.
The biggest mess is that we have an obesity pandemic, right?
Yeah.
And we know that so for a long time, you'll remember, they did two things. Number one, they tried to say obesity was genetic. And they tried to come up with the obesity gene. I don't know if people remember this, but I spoke about it, 20 years ago in my seminar saying how ridiculous it was and disproved it. And then after the obesity gene, right, and they didn't have a drug to treat obesity, correct? And they didn't want to, it was immoral to tell people to go for a walk and eat better food, apparently. And so then they all got diabetes, and then they made billions upon billions on the diabetes drugs. And then everybody got metabolic syndrome. It was all related to obesity and chronic inflammation that comes from obesity because, abdominal fat in particular, releases inflammatory macrophages, M1 macrophages that go in, they destroy your pancreas, they destroy everything. They destroy your brain. It makes you have chronic systemic inflammation, which is the baseline of all disease. Everybody knows how bad obesity is, right? But then what happened was the woke crowd came along, right? These people who are diabolically ridiculous. And then they said, be proud of being obese. Oprah's fat and she shouldn't try to lose weight anymore. You should be proud of your body. And then they tried to show you that obesity wasn't really that harmful. They all lied about it because basically what they said was, we want people to be obese. Number one, the pharma wanted it because they got lots of customers. And then everybody said it was socially acceptable to be obese, and you shouldn't be ashamed of your body. Unless, of course, you're ashamed of your genitals, then you get those lopped off. But you should never be ashamed of your size of your body. Because that's just you, it's genetic, and that's just who you are. And so be obese and proud. And then all of a sudden the drug came along that could treat obesity, and now all of a sudden Oprah's gobbling it down by the freaking truckload, and all these other people are gobbling it down, and now obesity's bad again.
Right.
And so I just want people to go back and just kind of think about the deception and fraud and dishonesty and lack of trust that has occurred just around obesity alone in the last 20 years.
Right. Be proud of your body. It's okay. And then the drug comes along. They're like, no, don't be proud of your body. We can fix that. We can fix that dysfunction of obesity that you have.
So now it's back to being a problem that you can't solve. It's an addiction. It's not genetic anymore, but it's an addiction, just like any other addiction.
And you're a
can't
victim.
Control it. So you need GLP-1 drugs, and here we go. So, and again, this whole time, of course, those of us in the know have been preaching, well, wait a minute, obesity is a lifestyle cause problem. You can get food addictions. By the way, just so people understand, all the people that worked in big tobacco, these companies and scientists that worked in big tobacco, when that all got exposed and they bought
big ag.
They brought big food first.
Big food.
Right. So which then also is very related to big ag, which I'll talk about in a second.
And the ag being agriculture, so big ag and big food,
Of course. So these people, these scientists who were highly paid to do two things. One, make cigarettes as addictive as possible, and 2, lie about it and say it doesn't cause cancer. That's basically what the job of these tobacco industry scientists were. They're fucking scumbags. Excuse my language.
But you know, I think that's a good.
Then that's murder, dude.
Yeah.
So,
but you know what? I think that's a good example for people when they say things like, "Oh, you don't think the drug companies are really trying to hurt us?" You go, "Look at big tobacco. Do you think that they weren't lying about their products and hiding things for decades? It's just a new playbook." And by the way, they bought the big food companies. They bought the big agricultural companies. They just shifted houses one over, rebuilt the same model.
Migrated the scientists who were hired to make tobacco addictive to make junk food addictive. So, and processed food addictive. These are the same freaking scumbags with the same outcome goal, which is to make stuff addictive so people buy it. And of course, they never get held accountable because big pharma benefits directly from big processed food, and they also benefit from big tobacco. And now what they did is the same people lobbied the government to subsidize crops like corn and wheat and soy, which is the baseline of all these processed foods, correct? Which also makes people sick. So now they're making millions of dollars in agriculture. And all the pesticides that you have to put on this shit to grow it. Then they're making millions of dollars in processed foods, or billions, I should say. Then they're making billions of dollars in pharmaceuticals to treat the effects of bad agriculture and bad food. This is the game.
And we have an ass wasting drug.
Yeah, correct. Stay tuned, right? I mean, dude. Anyway.
So you know what I find interesting though is you were talking about the number of obese adults, but now they've approved it for children. Is that right?
100 million, and children. The obesity rate for children, that's 40% of adults. I think obesity rate for children is now 30%. Jeez. Certainly more than that in some states, but I think overall it's about 30%. Correct me if I'm wrong. If it's 25, don't yell at me. I don't have it off the top of it, but it's high.
1 in 4, 1 in 3, somewhere in there.
Yeah, exactly. And so we've created this world, right, where we're now the sickest species in the history of the planet. We're the most overweight. We have the most metabolic syndrome. We're the most angry and murderous. We're the most depressed. We have the most indigestion. We have the most infertility. We have the most, low sex drive. We are the sickest species in the history of species on Earth. And all of this was done purposefully. All of it was done knowing what the result would be. People who were growing this food and these bathed in these glycophosphates and these, chemical fertilizers with no nutrients in them. People have been yelling about this for about a century about the food, right?
Yeah.
And then you go to the big agriculture, and then you go in big processed food, and then you go into big pharma. And my God, if you think your politicians are protecting you from this instead of benefiting from it, you're crazy.
You're crazy. So,
get prepared for them to totally attack anybody who tries to fight this, like Robert Kennedy or anyone else. They'll do ad hominem attacks, and that's just the way it goes. But I just understand that the reason we're primed for Ozempic to make trillions of dollars is because we've been primed by these people who are murdering us for profit. Right? Now, listen, it's also suicide. So boo-hoo, don't blame everybody else for making processed food. You walk up there and eat it. Yes, it's addictive, and yes, it's tricking you, and they are absolutely have a share in their responsibility. But there's a lot of us who don't eat it.
Right.
Right? And so, and again, education coming along to teach people how they're being tricked and duped and then drugged. That's really important, right? So the chiropractic kind of viewpoint of the world, the chiropractic paradigm, teaching all these people this has a tremendous impact. Right. So teaching people the truth about this stuff sometimes is the motivation they need to kind of go, you know what? Like, obviously, eating shit food and taking statins and blood pressure medications and GLP-1s maybe isn't what my goal in life should be. Maybe that's not the purpose of life on Earth. Maybe that's not how to be the greatest father, mother, daughter, granddaughter, citizen. Right. Like maybe there's something more,
And so these GLP-1s, what is the mechanism by which they work? And before we jump off the topic, the definition of doctor is teacher. some of what we're talking about is a bit of a straw man, right? You go look at the other side, look at what your options are with these things. Don't do that. And when we do health talks, we drove in 100 new patients from talks last month alone. Then what I do is I paint the paradigm that we're in, right? So if you don't want these things over here, that's the straw man. Do this instead. Talk me through a little bit of that straw man of what's the mechanism by which the GLP-1s work, and then get right into the side effects, because I think that's a big part of a deterrent for people from doing the medical paradigm.
Sure. So like all drugs, they do have a physiological effect.
Sure.
And if you can convince people that physiological effect is beneficial, like just go back and watch the Gerald Posner podcast, right? Because he's there telling us about how he kicked ass over at a debate in Cambridge. And I turned to him and I said, yeah, but you're fighting for more cheaper drugs, and the drugs are the problem. And he just went, for the first time, he's like, he thought the problem with pharma was that they were too expensive or maybe hid some adverse effects, and that if we had cheaper drugs, the world would be a better place. And what he realized suddenly was that if drugs were free, they'd still be a nightmare.
That's right.
And so just keep that in mind kind of as we talk about this. But that doesn't mean drugs do have a physiological effect. Right. That's the adverse effect. They're all adverse, but lowering blood pressure is an adverse effect. Lowering your cholesterol is an adverse effect. Drug-induced normal is not healthy. Drug-induced normal is a disaster. There's no such thing as drug-induced normal. It's just drug-induced homeostasis. And so what these GLP-1, so first of all, let's talk about what GLP-1 is. GLP-1 is a peptide, and GLP-1 is a peptide that attaches to receptors. There's an enormous number of them on the vagus nerve in particular. But they're all through the stomach. They're all through the plexus. They're everywhere, right? But so what happens when you eat is that and the food comes through your stomach and it goes into the small intestine. When it goes into the small intestine, that's the stimulus to release these GLP-1 peptides. And what these GLP-1 peptides are designed to do is to be released, and into the stomach, it'll slow gastric emptying. And it'll say, we've got some food in the small intestine right now, so slow down the gastric emptying and slow down the motility, release less acetylcholine to, fire those things off. We want to relax that smooth muscle instead of contracting, because we got to get this stuff digested that just came in. It also sends messages immediately up to your brain saying, hey, stop eating. We've got enough food right now. We're full. Stop eating. And it dampens immediately the pleasure that you would get from eating more food. When you're at the buffet and you just can't get another one in you, you know what I mean? Unless they make that drug addictive and very low volume with no fiber in it, you won't eat anything more. Right? The only thing you'll eat when you're super full at the buffet is the dessert, because you've told yourself there's a reward to it, but you're full and then you feel sick after. So anyway, so how these things generally work is these GLP-1s, and they're very short-lived. So these GLP-1s, the natural ones, these peptides are released, and they go in and they act and they get you to stop eating. They get the stomach to slow, they make you feel full, and they get the stomach to relax the smooth muscle. So how they work is a lot of people think, they dampen the vagus nerve. That's incorrect. They don't dampen the vagus nerve. They stimulate the afferents in the vagus nerve, but these are the afferents that are making you full. So what they do is they go to the brain centers that actually produce efferent vagal stimulation to the stomach, which inhibits smooth muscle contraction. So they are inhibitory in the sense that, first of all, they're excitatory to the afferent vagus signals, to the satiation centers and the pleasure centers of your brain, but then they stimulate the areas that will cause an inhibitory efferent vagal message into your stomach and digestive tract, right?
So to the brain, it tells you you're satisfied. Pumping out, it tells your stomach you're full.
Correct. And so it's going to get you to stop eating. It's going to slow down and makes you feel full because the stomach's going to stop emptying. So what these GLP-1, now remember, none of this happens unless you have food emptied from the stomach into the small intestine. That's the signal for it.
Right.
How the GLP-1 agonist works, and what these are basically, they're synthetic mimic, they're synthetic drugs, they're synthetic GLP-1s that mimic and will attach to the GLP-1 receptors. So they're similar enough. They've changed them a little bit so they can patent them, obviously, but they've changed them and also make them longer living. So the GLP-1s come and they go. They're very short acting. These GLP-1 drugs have been modified. Sometimes they add a little fat to them, and sometimes they change an amino acid, so they can't get broken down as quickly, so they're around all the time. So now what happens, before you even have a mouthful of food, you've got these GLP-1 pathways being stimulated up the vagus nerve to stop gastric motility and emptying and peristalsis. So when you eat food, it stays in your stomach. So you feel full all the time. You feel full before you even eat. Like a lot of these people actually just don't feel like eating at all.
Right.
So what my first thought on this was that, well, there's got to be a feedback loop that's screwing up your normal production of GLP-1, and it does. There's no doubt that it will actually stop your normal production of GLP-1, but this stuff's around anyway, so it doesn't matter. You're still going to feel full. But what happens eventually on these drugs after several months is it doesn't even slow down gastric emptying anymore, but you still feel full because the GLP-1, LP-1 drugs that are attacking to the receptors on the vagus still make you feel full, even though your stomach eventually will just overcome this and start emptying anyway.
Wow.
So, but you just have lost your appetite, right? You've just lost your appetite. So what I want people to think about before I start talking about the side effects is, so that's how these drugs work. They mimic a peptide released in your small intestine, right? And what they do is that they're gonna so they're gonna affect insulin, they're gonna affect glucagon, they affect all these pathways, and people can look that up if they want. I don't want to get too deep down the rabbit hole. It makes you feel full, and it makes you stop releasing glycogen into the bloodstream for energy, and it doesn't matter. So you're gonna be more likely to burn fat and not store it, and all these other kind of things. I won't get too far.
Yeah. Hey, docs, I want to interrupt this podcast really quickly with a bonus gift. You see, I've mentioned 100 new patients from Health Talks last month alone, and I want to gift you a webinar that's chock full of information on how you can book more Health Talks in your community. So if you want, you can go to our levelupmentoring.rocks website and get this webinar that will teach you and your team how to book more Health Talks. Now, we processed 118 new patients just from Health Talks alone. And of course, we had referrals and other things that were going on. And that really sets me up for the summer because most of my care plans are 90 days. So that means June, July, and August, I've got a full practice and I don't need to be there. In my practice model through Level Up, we have patients that show up for the chiropractic, not necessarily the chiropractor. Meaning my patients are there for the care, they're not there for me. So if you want this free webinar, it is how to book Health Talks. It's levelupmentoring.rocks/access-webinar. So levelupmentoring.rocks/access-webinar or -webinar, and that will give you access. It's going to be up for 30 days. So if you are interested in booking more talks through your team, it's a concise plan on how to do that. The second thing I want to make you aware of is because we processed over 150 new patients last month, I got a chance to really test my new material that I'll be teaching at the Elements of Closing workshop. Now, the Elements of Closing is going to be in Vegas in July. It's going to be in Chicago in October. But I'll also be back in Sydney, Australia, October 10th and 11th, and in Amsterdam over in Europe in August. That'll be August the 29th. I'll be in Amsterdam that weekend. So the reason I'm mentioning this is those 150 new patients that we processed, I've been working on new material for my day one and my report of findings. So we are breaking out our Elements Notebook 3.0. So docs that'll be going to the Las Vegas event the weekend of July 31st and August 1st will get the Elements 3.0 notebook. Also Amsterdam, August 29th and 30th, you'll get the 3.0 notebook. And docs who go to Sydney, Australia, you too can get the notebook, which will be October 10th and 11th in Sydney, Australia. So I get to test and try new material through my practice, which I call the lab, and I only teach what works. Do your chiropractic soul a favor and get to the Elements workshop. That is a place where we inspire patients We don't do scare care. We get paid for reducing subluxations, which is all the stuff that Chestnut and I talk about. And this is really what drove James and I to work together closely and do best practices, is he sat through my day one and report of findings procedures. And he said, I love the stickiness you create for the re-exams. You don't do the report of findings as a transaction. You're creating a relationship right from the day one. So then as we move through the plan, the patient gets more excited, not less excited. And the thing I would brag about that Chestnut saw right away is that stickiness. In Level Up, we have a 10% higher rate of people re-signing than even people signing at the ROF. So if you're 70% at the ROF, you should be 80% of your patients stay with you beyond their initial care plan. That's huge. So if you want a relationship ROF, and the best way to re-sign people, get to the Elements Workshop. I don't care who your coach is, you should be doing this workshop. And we even have 2 different coaches right now that are referring their clients to our day 1, day 2 in the Elements of Closing. So you can find those dates, levelupmentoring.rocks, but end of July, Las Vegas, end of August, the 29th and 30th in Amsterdam. I'll be in Sydney, Australia, October 10th and 11th, and then in Chicago, the weekend of October the 23rd. So if those work for you, and then the last thing I'll talk about really quickly is, out of the requests from doctors on this podcast, is how to do better table talk. Look, 1 referral from our Table Talk for Referrals program pays for the whole program. The faculty is insane. And what I did is I had veterans give us their best Table Talk sound bites. So I focus on how to generate the referrals, and we do it in a very ABC paint by numbers format. But I think one of the best parts of this program is I took veterans and I said, what is your best Table Talk for regular occurrences without trying to generate a referral? In other words, what's your best Table Talk that docs can use on the daily? And each month I give you an expert within the field that is a veteran on Table Talk that will help you out. And then I focus on how to generate the referrals, and then Eric Russell provides the science and the research. But here's my faculty in that program. Of course, I've got James Chestnut in the first module because we talk about Table Talk. Then we've got Guy Reekman, the late Guy Reekman. We've got Mary Oberstein. We've got Ron Oberstein. We've got Heidi Havoc. We have Dan Murphy, Billy DeMoss, Sharon Gorman, Kathy Cervais. We have Deed Harrison, Martin Harvey, Nicole Liederman from Canada. She's awesome. And then my good friend Chris Barham, who's the head of New Zealand Chiropractic College Board of Directors, been in practice for over 40 years, good friend, and some really genius sound bites. So they will provide sound bites each month that just helps with you or your associates' Table Talk. Then I give you the science, the research, the information. Each module has live examples of me doing Table Talk with my patients that actually generate the referral. And then we go up to the front desk CA, and you get to hear that conversation because I wear a microphone. You get to see it. You see the patient's reactions and the new patients coming in. So Table Talk for Referrals is a program where 1 referral pays for the whole program, but it's going to elevate your Table Talk on the regular and your associates. Table Talk for Referrals is an online masterclass. You can find that at levelupmentoring.rocks. Look, I know it's a lot, but I really want to get across that the new patients can be done when you want them, predictable growth. Our 3.0 manual for the Elements Workshop is phenomenal. It's all the upgrades based on what I'm doing in my practice that's helping us at a high level. And that workshop really is why we have the best wellness in second money conversions, going into once a week for life. If that's what you want to do, I've got all of that wired. And the truth is, then what you got to do is your Table Talk. So kind of chronologically, that's what's going on. Hey, I know it's a lot, but that webinar alone is worth its weight in gold. And those gems you're going to learn from the veterans on the Table Talk, second to none. Join us, and we will now get back to the podcast. Cheers, everyone. So just as you're saying that, though, I hope the chiropractors here, the practicing chiropractors here, that anytime we're talking about vagus nerve, there's an education piece there. There's a topic to be talked about. You could talk about normal vagus tone, what it does to your body, how it helps you out. And then you can shift into this topic of GLP-1s, or vice versa. You could be talking about the dangers of Ozempic, which would be a good title, right? Yeah. And people are, what do you mean? I was about to do it. I just had a consult. There's 85 million people out there. And then you could say, well, here's what we do with the adjustment, how it affects your vagus nerve. There's conversations there that can be tied in, whether it's vagus into don't do Ozempic, or you're having an Ozempic lecture as a word of caution, and then you get into how your body naturally works using the vagus. So I think that's really important too, that people understand just some of those baseline concepts. We don't have to get too into the whole domino effect down the line. But I mean, you've already covered some really important stuff where the brain centers are satiated or happy hormones on the afferent loop, and then the efferent loop, the stomach is satiated. So kind of keep going there from there, because I think it's very much a chiropractic. What's
That's
that?
good, because that summary that you made is very good. Like, I don't like to get into biochemistry because people shut off it, but basically, if they don't, this makes you feel full, and it keeps your stomach from emptying, and it fires off the areas of your brain that make you feel full. And so now we can understand the side effects. If we just understand those very simple mechanisms, if we understand that normally this GLP-1 peptide gets released when food goes into the intestine, but if you're injecting it, it's around all the time. So it's acting on your stomach to keep it not emptying and reduce the smooth muscle contractions and all that stuff in your stomach before you even eat. And that's how this works down it. But now that we understand that basically what it's doing is it's mimicking that you have just had a huge meal. And so now people can start to understand at least the simple side effects that everyone gets. Number one, nausea, vomiting, very super common, why most people stop it. You feel sick. But the other thing it does is it really affects the dopamine areas in your brain. Like ventral tegmental area, there's receptors that'll go from the nucleus strike, doesn't matter. But so people often heard me say, well, humans are dopamine addicts, right? Like we need dope. So when you just ask yourself this, after you've had a giant meal, do you feel like exercising?
No.
You don't. And if you, by the way, what these things do is they dampen in other words, they've dampened the pathway for pleasure from eating. But they dampen a lot of other pleasures. This is why some people say, well, they seem to be quite successful getting people off alcohol or drugs, right? Because what they do is they're stopping your drive to get dopamine. But one of the great drives to get dopamine is to exercise and move around to find more food or to eat. And so what these people get is called anhedonia. And anhedonia is a feeling where is when the things that normally would give you joy or pleasure just don't give you joy or pleasure anymore. And that's one of the main adverse effects of GLP-1 drugs.
And that word again was anhedonia? That's my chestnut word for the day.
Hedonia. Yeah, look it up. And basically
I would have to know how to spell it. How do you kind of buy a vowel?
Anhedonia. Anhedonia. So look it up, because it's really, by the way, lack of exercise does the same thing. You just can't feel pleasure unless you're moving around. People all know this. Depression and lack of movement is very highly related. So if you can't feel pleasure from food because it's firing off these areas in your brain saying you're already full, you've already had your pleasure from food, but it mimics the same thing. So now people they get personality changes. There's suicidal ideation. There's depression that's related to this. There's lack of motivation to exercise or move around or do your tasks at work. Like a lot of these big tech companies now are freaking out about all these people because they make them sit at a desk all day and freaking program, so they're overweight and they got shit, in the cafeteria and on the vending machines everywhere. But now they're freaking out because these people are losing their motivation and drive. So a lot of these big companies are freaking out about all the people that are on these GLP-1 agonist drugs because they're losing motivation. So you lose sex drive, you lose the drive to exercise, you get this feeling of anhedonia where life is not pleasurable anymore. So literally,
you lose creative juices. You lose the drive at work, right? So that's why they came up. That's why they came up with coffee breaks. You want to go get caffeinated, be more productive? We'll give you 15 minutes off. But now, if you're not productive, that ties into our conversation of absenteeism and presenteeism. You can see where this has a negative effect, and the tech companies, if it affects the bottom line, you've got their attention.
Of course, and so there's no doubt that these drugs elicit weight loss, and there's no doubt that they're going to change blood sugar because you're just not eating as much, so your blood sugar is not all the time. And if you do that, there's no doubt that it's going to change heart disease, it's going to change diabetes, it's going to change metabolic syndrome. There's no doubt about any of this shit. I'm not denying any of it. What I'm telling you is, what's the cost of that, right? And there's two big things I would like to sort of talk about. And one is, first of all, you turn into someone who's either got an upset stomach all the time, you don't enjoy food, which one of the great joys of life that we're hardwired through evolution to be able to enjoy a good meal. It should be healthy, but we're hardwired to enjoy food and the socialization that comes with it and all the other preparing it and gathering and all this other stuff. So it doesn't make you crave healthy food, by the way. You can still have low gastric emptying with shit food, which these people's habits never change. So it's not like all of a sudden they're eating smaller salads.
Right.
They're eating smaller chips. They're eating smaller all the French fries and all the other bullshit. So now they're getting less food, and they're now even more nutrient deficient. But they're also deficient in any motivation to go exercise. So what you're going to hear sold for this GLP-1 is, well, it does cause a lot of muscle wasting. It does cause a lot of these other problems. Like the best thing we could do is get people onto a lifestyle change where they're eating healthy and exercising and taking these GLP-1 drugs. But what do the GLP-1 drugs do? They downregulate your motivation to exercise and do anything else. Like you lose your motivation. So, and you're nauseous and sick all the freaking time or have diarrhea. Very, very common. Now, can you get thyroid cancer? Yes, rare. Can you go blind? Yes, rare. These things, they're in the literature, but they are very rare. But what's not rare, what we're talking is in like the 40 to 50% range, are these ones of nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, crashes in blood sugar, lack of motivation, just feeling depressed and down, getting no joy out of life, anhedonia, right? So, and this is the question I have for people. So why would someone go on a GLP-1 drug?
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking that. I didn't want to interrupt you, but it's like, why the hell would you start this?
Well, the same reason, remember in our really great podcast with Posner. Is it Posner or Posner? How do I want to say it?
6 of one, half dozen of another.
I'm not sure. Posner, but anyway, it is that he teaches in there the trick of how they do these drug ads, that they know for sure that if you have the people walking on the beach and then you say all the adverse effects, that their brain doesn't pay attention. They don't even care. It's a sidebar. Yeah. Or you just don't even mention the name of what the drug can do. You just mention the name of the drug over and over again. Then you don't have to even mention the side effects. But two of those things are very informative in my opinion. And so the people who are on these drugs, I just want you to understand something. They're obese. They already have low self-esteem. They already are depressed or depressive. They already have low self-control, and they already feel and look not well, right? So these people aren't getting up in the morning full of energy, ready to go get the day and exercise anyway. So when you say to these people, you're going to feel sick and nauseous, they already feel gross.
Yeah.
So to them, they're like, why, who cares? I already feel bad, but maybe I can at least be skinnier and feel bad.
Yeah, I can feel bad, but look good.
Right? You can understand that, well, on that trade-off.
Fair enough,
sure.
Yeah.
Then what happens is they get so sick, they go off it. 70 to 80% have to stop it, and then they rebound. And these people now have less muscle mass than when they started.
Right.
And then they go back and gain the weight. The rebound is almost 100%.
And we know the metabolic process with muscle mass in your body is a good thing. If you waste the muscle because you're on the drug and then you inflate and get big again, but now you're down that muscle mass, not good.
Now you're going to gain weight. Now you have less muscle to move that weight around. Now you have less ability to take blood sugar out of the system because your muscles are the best way to do that, especially short term. Like there's a million problems with bone waste, and they get bone loss too, by the way. And so what I would say to people is, like, just for a moment, think about, the mental, emotional, physiological consequences of a human being giving up so thoroughly that they say, I know that exercise and eating better food, even just exercise without changing your diet, but either one of those two are both in combination, would no doubt produce no adverse effects. Like on every metabolic measure, brain function, Alzheimer's, looking at Alzheimer's, brain function, mood, exercise is phenomenal. So is better food, omega-3, vitamin D, just those alone, right? On blood sugar, on pancreatic function, on muscle function, on heart health, on kidney health, on pancreatic health, on digestive health, on sexual health, on sleep health. Every single measure you could think of. There is irrefutable evidence that says going for a walk, just starting at 5 minutes a day and working up to 30 minutes, will improve all of those things in the right direction and give you a longer, better life without any shadow of a doubt, with no adverse effects.
Mm.
The GLP-1 drugs will make you lose weight fast and make you sick. You're going to be an unhealthy, skinny person until the adverse effects are so bad you go off it, and then you're going to be an unhealthier, overweight person again.
Right.
There is no health benefits, right? In terms of, yes, when you lose the adipose tissue, there is a health benefit to losing that adipose tissue, but it does not even come close to losing that adipose tissue from living a healthier lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And unless you're going to stay on those drugs for the rest of your life and have those adverse effects for the rest of your life, and over time they your chances of the long-term consequences, which we're not even aware of, are going to increase. But what you do when you take that injection, you got to inject this into your body, right? Most of them are not oral, is that you're telling yourself you can't do it. Mm-hmm. What you said is, I'm not capable of controlling my own life. Mm. Now, what I would say to somebody is,
dude, you're a master of reframing that. Can you say that again? Because upon injection, you're almost admitting defeat to the subconscious mind, or as we say, the superconscious. Explain that again, because that's a great reframe for maybe chiropractors to help their patients.
Yeah, you're telling yourself, I have no self-control. I can't run my own life. I require an injection to stop me from eating junk food. And so, or overeating. But it's overeating junk food. We already know that. And by the way, there's no evidence whatsoever that GLP-1 drugs make you crave healthier food and not crave unhealthy food. You crave less food, but you're going to crave the same foods already. And because, so
you still need to change your behaviors.
Well, you do, but they don't. And that's the problem. That's why they rebound. And so the reality is that it is not a long-term solution. If you could get people, and I will say this, and my view on drugs, but I have a very reasonably deep understanding of obesity and inflammation and diabetes, right? And what I'll tell you is those things are devastating, and they're the leading causes of, metabolic dysfunction and healthcare costs and hospitalizations and early death and shitty quality of life. There's no doubt about it. So if you could get people to exercise vigorously and eat healthy food and go on a GLP-1 for 6 to 12 months, you'd be getting somewhere.
Right.
There's no evidence it's ever been done.
Jeez.
Right? There's no evidence that this evidence. So what they'll say is the best thing to do would be a combination of more exercise and these drugs. But the other thing that happens is, while you're on these drugs, you're learning nothing about the ability to control yourself. Mm-hmm. Just like the antidepressants. You don't learn how to think positively, right, and resolve anxiety and be a solution-focused human being while you're on a drug. You just get numb on the
almost like a resolving factor for behavior. And I've heard you say this many times. You cannot walk and move and simultaneously be depressed.
No, you can't. And you also can't be grateful and be depressed. And the reality is that, these people, number one, how do you explain that that there's 100 million, that's 40% of all adults, that there's 100 million obese people in the United States. Wow. Just explain that, please. Wow. Just start there.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell me how that happened? And what
it's the standard American diet. The acronym is SAD because it's fucking sad.
Right. And so I'll tell you how it happened. It happened by the monopoly and the lobby of experts telling people how to eat and live.
Okay.
It happened by policy. It happened by farming policy. It happened by policy of what they're allowed to call food and put in a supermarket at the eye level of children. It happened by the food guide. It happened by people telling you that your problems are genetic, not lifestyle, that you should take a drug for cholesterol, for blood sugar, for obesity, for for depression, for indigestion, for whatever it is. The whole thing is caused by listening to so-called experts who are either stupid or dishonest and greedy or both, who have taken over society and created 100 million obese adults in the United States, all of them medicated. So this is what this system has created.
Yeah.
We operate outside that system as chiropractors. The real chiropractors say, no, we're not part of that system. I don't want to be part of that system. I wouldn't have more pride if I was in that system. I wouldn't have gone into that system if I could. And the only reason I'm a chiropractor is I couldn't get into that system.
Why would you want to be in that system?
That system is dishonest. That system is murderous. That system is destroying a species and the environment that species urinates and defecates in, because they're so full of these drugs and the pesticides we use for our farms and all this shit. We're destroying everything. And so the only solution to this is to step back and change everything.
That's right.
We've got to change the education. Instead of a little book that tells a little kid to go to the doctor and get a pill or go get their vaccine, they start from infancy, from womb to tomb. Maybe we start teaching kids how to take care of themselves and the importance of exercise and eating well and self-love and love and respect of others. Like, maybe we could just change everything. But until we do that, there is no drug that's ever going to solve the problems that we've created for ourselves. There is no drug. There's no medical intervention that's going to prevent any of this or solve it. There's none.
And I'll say, on a personal note, why would you want to fit into the medical system when it's a sinking ship? And to me, it's like looking for acceptance of a system that you just described baffles me. I go, why would you need validation from them? Look at how they operate and look at the carnage in the wake of destruction that they've gone from the big ag, the big agricultural, the soil quality, the nutrients that are deficient in food, to the preservatives, to the things they pump in the food to keep on the shelf life, to creating addictions, to the food coloring and sources that are only found in the U.S. and not allowed to be used outside the U.S. And the truth is, it's a global mission to just suppress your body's ability. Why would you want validation from those people when they have just recently, maybe a month ago, 2 months ago, announced they will now start teaching 40 hours of nutrition at medical schools? Big deal. You're going to go from zero nutrition education for the last 40 years to now a week worth of nutrition.
And by the way, what are they going to teach? But the epiphany I've had, Brad,
sponsored by Pfizer.
Yeah. Or Good Host, or what the food guide. So, yeah. But the epiphany I've had is that it's not a sinking ship, Brad.
Okay.
They're sinking our ship. They are not sinking. They are thriving.
Oh, there you go.
And they are sinking in terms of outcomes, right? But the truth is, they're not sinking. They're sinking our ship.
Yeah.
Right. They're the cargo that we're carrying around, or in our backpacks, or on our ship, that are destroying and putting holes in our ship and causing us to sink. But they're not sinking because they own us. They own government. They own the policy. That sinking ship just started approving Ozempic.
Right.
Yeah. Right. That like that ship's not sinking, man.
Yeah. It's well said. No,
I don't want to sink that ship. I don't. My goal is never going to be to try to get rid of them. I have to get rid of the desire for them. Wow. My only hope always, if I've always felt this way, has been to educate people so that they stop using that system. So they stop believing that drugs are saving them, that they can't possibly move somewhere where they can't get their drugs, that's the solution. But the only way to stop that freaking cancer, that thing that's killing us all, is to stop the demand for it. You got to cut off the funds. And the government's not going to do it because they fund the government and they write the legislation that they get legislators to sign off on. The only way that we're ever going to have any hope is to get people to stop using the products.
Right.
And to demand something different. But this idea, if we're waiting for that ship to sink, my epiphany is that they're not going to sink. They'll kill us out first.
Right. Agreed. No, I can get behind that. And I think also one of the things that's super important is the GLP-1s, there's the peptide in there. So can you speak maybe quickly to...
Peptide, right?
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the peptide in that? Because I think that's probably another conversation, maybe another podcast. We've got Aaron Siri lined up to do a podcast with us here on the Chiro-Factor. I would love to hear a little bit of that connection to peptides, and maybe that's a topic we cover in the future.
Yeah, I mean, all a peptide is just it's like basically a series of amino acids that your body makes that has, it's like that has, physiological effects. So peptides are always along pathways that can either be upregulated or downregulated, just like GLP-1 stimulates receptors. So peptides that's the role they play in the body. So some of them, create more muscle building. Some create, they're involved in digestion, they're involved in tissue repair, they're involved in all kinds of things. So this idea that, I'm gonna start jacking up with peptides because peptides are natural. Well, yes, so is testosterone. There's no doubt that you could have an outcome I can find an outcome that peptides will improve. I can find an outcome that jacking up with testosterone will improve. I can find an outcome that statins will improve. I can find an outcome that cocaine will improve. I can find an outcome that will be improved by any of these things.
Right.
That's the question. The question is, why are you doing it? And why do you have that outcome goal? Is it vanity or is it health? Do you think you can get health by improving on the design of the body, that somehow we're not supposed to age? That's ridiculous, that we're gonna defeat that, and so that's your goal? Or I want to look like I'm 30 when I'm 70? Sure, Bobby Kennedy, jack up on that shit. You look great. What's the consequence going to be when you're 80? Don't know. What's the consequence to the idea that you just didn't do it naturally? I don't know. But I'm not a fan of all this stuff, Brad, as you can probably tell. My point is work harder, right? And so as you get older...
you're not promoting peptides right now?
No, I'm not promoting anything injecting your body to get a result that like, why do you need to jack up with peptides? Oh, my body's slowly reducing the production of them. Is it slowly reducing because of age, or is it slowly reducing of it because you like to get drunk every weekend and you eat shit food and you've decided that you want to look like you're 30 on steroids when you're 70, And so my point is like, look, I don't argue any of the effects of these things. There's no doubt that you can get some benefits from these things, right? Depending how you define a benefit. But the reality is, until you had like severe muscle wasting as you exercise every day, why would you take testosterone? Right? And you're like, I can't, my dingling's not working. I'm like, well, your dingling's not working, not because you're 60. I'm 60. My dingling works great. But there's lots of guys at 30 whose dingling doesn't work. And right? Why? Because you're not healthy.
Right.
And so the question is, do you want to walk around injecting 50 different things? One for sex drive, one for so you can get an erection, one so you can have a bicep, one so that you're going to lose weight, one so that your skin's going to look a little tighter. At the end of the day, you're turning yourself into a robot.
Yeah.
And I don't agree with that mentality. I agree with the mentality, which is that our ancestors who lived well, lived long, healthy, active lives, but aging's inevitable.
That's right. And I just had to get you riled up once on this episode. Our viewers would have been disappointed. And I got bonus points because I got you revved up and you were saying dingling.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if someone says to me, I take peptides and I'm getting this result, I'm not here to judge anybody for doing it. But my question is, I would just ask them to ask a bigger question. But there's a lot of people take steroids when they're 30 to look great.
That's right. And the problem is that's that negative feedback, right? You pump it in artificially, your brain goes, we have enough. And they shut it off for life. The risk you run is that your brain goes, we never need to make it again.
You and I were talking to somebody, we're not going to mention any names, who basically just admitted to us openly in the conversation, I chemically castrated myself 20 years ago. I can't go off testosterone replacement now. When they were a young person.
Yep.
And like not even batting an eye, like as if somehow that's no big deal. I can just regulate it from the outside and inject it. And I'm like, that's not the chiropractic worldview to me.
No.
Now,
And so
I don't criticize people for it, but I'm just saying,
right.
You've got to understand that what you're doing is there's never a consequence-free choice when you start injecting things into your body. Doesn't mean no benefit. It just means there's never a consequence-free choice.
That is a Chestnut-ism. And look, for the listeners, if you watch this on YouTube or Spotify, iTunes, we love the comments. We love when you comment underneath it, like on YouTube. A lot of times we'll take screenshots and go, look, this is a #1 fan. Please leave some comments. But can you just repeat that, Chestnut, one of the Chestnut-isms? Consequences, injections. If you can just rephrase what you just said.
Your body produces, you're going to downregulate the endogenous or natural production of that. There's no exceptions. GLP-1's the same. There's
no consequence-free
injection of any kind. So my point is that I don't want to argue with all these people about that. Yeah, but you get more muscle mass, and my leg feels better. And I'm like, okay, if you had a very serious injury and for a short period of time you wanted to inject something that was proven to increase your ability to heal that tissue, I'm all in. That's a separate issue, right? Than saying I'm going to inject this now every day because I like the idea that I beef up my muscles and I look better and I do this or that. So what I would say is, if you want to do that, that's breast surgery. I don't care, but let's not pretend that it's natural because it's a peptide. You're still injecting it in there, right? Testosterone's natural too. So you're still going to have a negative consequence for that. That's a cost-benefit analysis. That's an individual decision. But don't pretend there's no negative consequence. You know what I mean? And by the way, a lot of them won't be known yet because a lot of this stuff is new. I'm a slow adapter when it comes to injecting shit into my body.
Well, that's just it. To me, people are like, there's no side effects. I'm like, well, short term, because we're a year or two into people using it. However, there are over 2,000 people claiming to be totally blind because of Ozempic use, but we'll come back to that. It's like, but put it down the track 5 years, 8 years. Now, what are we going to see?
What happens if you stop taking it? I'll just take it forever. Okay, well, that's a choice. But can I ask you a question? What if you changed your lifestyle and worked out with weights regularly and did your aerobic stuff, or anaerobic is even better, and you just exercised regularly and ate a decent diet and didn't drink too much alcohol and you didn't smoke cigarettes? Like, what would you look like? And if that's unsatisfactory to you, my question would be, why?
Right. You
might look your age. Dude, I'm 60. Right. I look 60. I don't care. I mean, who cares?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm just saying, like, now, if I stop, if something was it wasn't operating. In other words, if it was literally a functional health issue, it wasn't an ego issue, I think that's a different cost-benefit analysis. But right. I don't believe I'm going to live forever. I don't want to live forever. I don't believe I'm going to stave off aging any better with something I inject than when I go down to the gym every morning and work out and punch the dummy, pretending it's whoever I'm pissed off at the time.
I've seen some of those videos.
Or golfing with my wife, or making love to my wife, or having a great meal with friends, or even once in a while having a few extra gin and tonics, as long as I don't do it all the time. You and I have had some of the greatest enjoyment with these guys at the seminars, and some fun laughs
some of the best community has been after the seminar.
Great laughs and community and just wonderful people to be around and enjoy with. But you can't do that every weekend. You know what I mean? Like, and so it's like, if you just live a reasonable life, if you do the good stuff every day and the bad stuff intermittently, you have a great life.
That's right.
You have great health and a great life. That's just the rules.
I always tell my patients, working out is a part-time job, eating smart is a full-time job. And it just makes sense. At a certain age, you can't outwork out the bad calories you put in. So, like, eat smart and then, be active on a consistent basis. You can't be depressed and be moving. Will you do me a favor, buddy, and just run through those statistics again that we kind of went through at the top of the show, because I cut you off a little bit, but can you go through kind of like top to bottom the Ozempic numbers? Because I also know some people listen to this in two parts, so they might have heard the first piece, but I think the numbers you put together, it'd be worth repeating in case they are listening to this as part number two, say half of the podcast on the way to work, half on the way home. Let's go through those numbers again.
Okay, so first of all, there's 100 million obese people, adults, 100 million obese adults in the United States. Right now, 15 million of them are on a GLP-1 inhibitor. That means there's 85 million that are indicated for a GLP-1 that are not yet on it. Right now, they're spending $70 billion a year on that 15 million. And the other 85 million, they project that it would be trillions of dollars a year if those people all that are indicated for it got on it. So it's staggering. And if again, I just encourage you, just go and punch into AI, what would be a better, more financially effective and health and better effects in terms of overall public health, the health of individuals and the cost. What would be better? Subsidizing people for healthy food and getting them to even supervised exercise, or putting them on GLP-1s. And it's just hands down. And then ask AI, why isn't that happening? And they'll tell you all the truths that we've been telling you chiropractors have been saying for 100 years, because drugs will never work to prevent illness or get sick people well, ever. And because all the incentives are towards prescribing these drugs, because that's where all the money is. And so they have to teach you that your outcome goal is a lowered number on a test that can be lowered quite quickly with a drug that inhibits your natural ability to self-regulate and then lowers that number. So that's everything is about teaching people that that's their outcome goal. My outcome goal is lower blood pressure, right? What we're saying is, no, your outcome goal is better health and function.
That's right. And I think that's a major point. I hope it doesn't escape the docs that they're saying your outcome goal is this lowered number. They've basically reframed what health is. This number is health. And the reality is, we know better health and function is what it should be. But at the same time, what you're being told is a pre-test number and a post-test number. And those post-test numbers, that's the indicator for better health.
And they call that a positive outcome when that's actually an adverse effect. And the reality is, these people are so well convinced through big pharma and the medical associations are all working together, spending money to propaganda, is that these people are willing to be absolutely ill to achieve that number.
Yeah.
I'm dizzy. Golfing the other day with a guy, a young guy. He bends over to pick up his ball. He's like, oh man, I can barely bend over and get up now because they just put me on this blood pressure medication. It's really hard. But he's willing to go through that because they told him that lowering that blood pressure number on the test was worth whatever he has to go through to get there.
Right. Now my question for you is what hole was that? Because if that was the third hole, I'm guessing he had 15 holes of hell with you.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I wasn't actually golfing with him. He came and told me later because I asked him how his round went. He said, "Oh, anyway," and he told me the story, and I'm just like, my rule is if people don't tell me to do it or tell me it's a good idea, I keep my mouth shut. If they ask for my advice, I give it. If they tell me it's a good idea and everybody should do it, if they tell me there's no other options, that's the only choice, I beak up. But if someone just tells me they have a concern, I don't feel it's my role to jump in and say you're crazy. If it's a relative of mine or if it's a discussion, I do. And so that's kind of my rule on it, right? But a lot of the times walking around, I've told people, because they've asked me, what do you think of statins? I say, get off them immediately. They're killing you. They're like, what? And then I tell them the story. And then I say, here's the information. Here's what you do. And they're like, they're blown away by it.
Yeah.
They've never heard it before. They actually believe that one of the most important things that you can do for people as they age is to make sure they're taking their pills properly. They think that's a major factor in the health of the aging population, is to make sure they're getting drugs. One of the biggest things is they might forget to take the pills. Right.
So the thing they worry about is Alzheimer's, and they forget to take their pills, right? So back to that nonsense. Yeah.
And a million other things. It's not just statins, but there's certainly lower cholesterol for your brain is terrible for your brain.
A couple of things I want to kind of do before we wrap this up. One is I want to remind people the dates for 2027. We've talked about Scotland in 2027 is going to be March the 6th, Toronto, May the 1st weekend, and then Sydney, Australia.
With the CNAC in Toronto, right?
Yes.
Yes,
yeah.
Okay.
So, and then Sydney, Australia, October 22nd. So Scotland, March the 6th, the weekend, Toronto, May the 1st weekend, Sydney, October 22nd weekend, all of 2027. One of the things I would remind docs that I think could really put an exclamation point on this GLP conversation and really illustrate the pills versus natural health. Can you share with us the soundbite that you've shared at Best Practices and what we've shared together? So again, those are the dates you and I will be together next. March 6th, March 6th, Scotland, May 1st, Toronto, Sydney in October. But you talk about people with healthy blood pressure when it's done by pills and not with pills. And I don't want to steal the thunder, but can you explain how this ties into actuaries?
Yeah, so when you go to get life insurance, I use this example often. It could be health insurance, but let's just use life insurance. So what they do is they have to, before they decide how much to charge you, they have to figure out what the statistical chance is that you're going to die, and they have to figure out when you will die. Like, what statistically are you most likely to die in 6 months, 12 months, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. So the more unlikely you are to die or be sick and cost them money. If it's life insurance, it's die. If it's health insurance, it's cost them money. And by the way, these companies, the drug companies, have lobbied successfully to stop health insurance companies from being able to charge you more because you're sick. They used to do it. And they lobbied and lobbied and lobbied under Obama and said it wasn't fair to charge people more money if they had a pre-existing condition.
I was going to say that's a pre-existing conditions clause.
No, they used poor little kids with cancer, which I agree with. That's awful, right? But they used that to wipe out all pre-existing conditions. Right. So in other words, if someone's overweight, if they're obese, if they eat like garbage, if they drink too much, you can't charge them more anymore. So health insurance has to be the same cost for everybody. They weren't allowed to do that. They didn't lobby that for life insurance. So in other words, life insurance needs to know, when are they going to pay out your premium? So what they need is they need to be sure that they're not going to give you $1 million and you're going to die next week. And right. If they think you're going to die next week, your premium is going to be an awful lot higher or next year than if they think you're going to die in 20 years. So the way they figure that out is they have a battery of tests. And the battery of tests they use be like, do you have metabolic syndrome? What are all these different physiological levels, which, by the way, can be quite accurate. But what's most interesting is that, so now I always use the example, I say, well, if you had two identical twins, and so they're genetically identical, so there's no, family history that's different, even though family history is garbage anyway, but it doesn't matter, I don't have time. But let's say, so they're genetically identical twins, and all of their blood pressures are the same, their statins are the same, their blood sugar's the same, everything's the same. And I always say to people, so would they pay the same for their life insurance? And everybody goes, well, yeah, of course. And I say, absolutely not. I say, because if one of the twins has normal blood pressure, but they're on blood pressure medication, or has normal cholesterol, but they're on cholesterol medication, or has normal blood sugar, but they're on blood sugar medication, or has a normal BMI, but they're on a GLP-1, and the other twin has not drug-induced homeostatic numbers, but lifestyle-induced homeostatic numbers. They have normal blood pressure, but they're not on medication. They have normal cholesterol, but they're not on medication. They have normal blood sugar, but they're not on medication. They have normal BMI, but they're not on medication. Then the person who's on medication pays far more for life insurance than the person who. Why? Because they know that person is sick, and they know taking those drugs isn't going to make them less sick.
Right.
And before, the insurance companies, when they were allowed, would also say, even for health insurance, you have all normal numbers, but we know that you're so sick because you're on all these drugs and they're never going to make you healthy, that you're going to cost us more money every year. Your premiums have to be higher.
Crazy.
And in fact, in the literature, the definition of metabolic syndrome has been changed. So instead of metabolic syndrome, used to be high blood sugar, high cholesterol, high blood sugar, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high BMI. Well, now you are diagnosed with metabolic syndrome if you have normal blood pressure, but you're on a drug. They now know that you still have metabolic syndrome, even if you have normal blood pressure, normal statins, and normal blood sugar, and normal body weight, if you're on drugs to get there. They know you're still metabolically compromised. So they literally have changed the definition of metabolic syndrome.
I love that. I love that for an illustration for the listeners, as the way you described it at the Best Practices Seminar, which when we do this, it won't be till 2027. I think everybody needs to go at least once in their career. probably twice. I'm around you all the time and I keep hearing things different ways and said differently. But one of the ways you described it was drug-induced homeostasis is more expensive to insure for life insurance.
You're still sick. Drug-induced
because you're still sick. And now what I've just heard you say, like another layer to this, is they've changed the definition of metabolic syndrome.
International Diabetes Federation, one of the Heart Federation, they changed the definition of metabolic syndrome because what they realized was these people who are on blood pressure medication, cholesterol medication, blood sugar medications, and now would be obesity medications, they're not healthy. They're still metabolically completely compromised. They just have changed numbers due to drugs inhibiting some of the natural pathways.
We hang out and talk a lot, and that's news to me. And here we are 90 minutes into this podcast, and you're still dropping gold. It's massive, though, right? This drug-induced homeostasis, you're still sick. You still have metabolic syndrome. Like, ladies and gentlemen, that's a mic drop. And if you do it naturally, you pay less because you're actually not sick. So if you're naturally at a place of homeostasis versus drug-induced homeostasis, two totally different premiums you're going to pay.
Healthy lifestyle-induced homeostasis is the definition of health. Drug-induced homeostasis is not the definition of health. Simple. That's it.
Massive.
It's over.
Massive.
And these people, and so what they don't teach people that taking the drug's going to make them healthy. That's a lie. They can't do it. What they say is taking the blood pressure medication will probably lower your blood pressure. If it doesn't, we'll give you another one. If it doesn't, we'll give you another one.
Right.
Eventually, you'll get sick enough, you go off them because you feel so bad. But bottom line is, if you stay on the blood pressure medications and you keep getting added to it, if they don't work with 1, then 2, then 3, then it'll lower your blood pressure. Statins will lower your cholesterol.
Yeah.
And then they have to lie and say that means you're going to live longer or have less chance of a heart attack. That's a lie. Right. Statistically, that's a lie. The absolute difference is minuscule.
So, look, one of the things that we always implore chiropractors to do in this podcast is be a great chiropractor. Understand that the adjustment-centric is really where we are different. We are the best. We are supreme. And you don't have to feel like a second-class citizen. If you get too into the weeds on these conversations, I think we've discussed this at length now. You've got enough material to hopefully deter people from getting started on it because we know most of them come off of it. But also, it's a losing proposition for the people that are in the middle of it, right? So to me, I think be a better chiropractor. One of the things you've provided is a tool called the Chestnut Spinal Health Assessment. I'll for sure let people know that innatechoice.com is where you get that. Be a better chiropractor so you don't have to get stuck in the weeds in some of these conversations because there'll be another peptide or another thing that pops up that you'll be fighting as a chiropractor from an outside-in perspective versus inside-out. And so be great. And the people you have in your practice, put them on a plan. Get them the care that they need. Start with the if statement that we talked about on the day one. And in that sense, you should have every tool possible to illustrate what you do, show the benefits of your care. So I implore you, get on innatechoice.com, go get the Chestnut Spinal Health Assessment, and start to illustrate the benefits of your care so you're not further downstream arguing the next latest and greatest drug that 100 million people are on and as soon as are capable of and 15 million people are on, because the truth is, there's social proof in that. Like, well, all these millions of people wouldn't be on it if it was safe. And like, just give it 10 years and then those patients become carnage. It's crazy.
It's like the previous weight loss drug that came out with the same thing. It was completely taken off the market for the same thing, but
same mechanisms, right? And so to me, be a better educator. I still do health classes. I mentioned doing health talks last month. We did 11 talks and drove in over 100 new patients because I want to teach people. But a lot of these sound bites, I can use it from the vagus nerve, the afferent and the efferent loop. I can talk about how it confuses the body and what the negative feedbacks are. You've given us a plethora of statistics. And then what you're allowed to do then is just boil down your table talk into little sound bites. And I think that's an area that a lot of chiropractors suck at.
Like, I think, I don't want this to get lost on the audience, but when you're talking about, you just went and did a bunch of health talks. Those were not inside your practice. Those were health talks that you gave in the community.
That's right.
Which people into your office, which is huge. And then, of course, you have these great procedures in your office. But I think one of the things that most people struggle with is how to get them into the office. And I don't think there's a better way than what you teach, which is, getting into these corporations or getting into these other places where you can, these community places where you can actually give a really good talk that gives people real good information. Whether they sign up or not, they walk. I always love the way you phrase that, which is whether they sign up or not, they gain value.
Totally.
But obviously, my cultural authority is just skyrocket in front of them, and I have a really good close, which you do. And I think that's really important because I think the biggest struggle for most people is getting them in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And fair enough. And a lot of what I use, and this is kind of what we had a bunch of our mutual students bring us together and go, you two have to work together, is a lot of the sound bites I use and the statistics are from you. It's from the stuff that you shared over the years, many years. It's written in your book. But some of this stuff, it's what we would call straw man technique. This is the medical approach. And look at how weak this paradigm is. And then what you've got to do in behavioral psychology is build that new paradigm and go, but this is the paradigm we're in. And we've shared a bunch of it, so I'm not going to go back through that. But I just think that that's a huge piece of like breaking down that paradigm and then showing this paradigm. It's a compare and contrast, and chiropractic wins every time. And then, we put them on care plans. And I'm not going to apologize for putting people on care plans because you give yourself the time to heal. So as people move through, they're getting better as they go. And then one of the things I want to finish with is a quick story because I think people deserve to hear this. But look, when you get them on a care plan, you've earned the right to do little sound bites for your table talk. You don't have to give a health class at the table talk, right? You and I have talked about this. It's a novel stimulus. Give them a sound bite. One of the things that we use in our table talk, I learned from you, which is what the research shows. What the research shows is, and so you can weave this in but it's like one nugget, one thing, and then you move on. It's not a health class. And I heard someone say this recently, said, well, we do our table talk after we adjust them, we sit them up and then we do table talk. I go, wait a minute. They're sitting up and you do table talk? That's not table talk.
Yeah.
Right? It's like they're face down when you should be doing it. But the idea is, anyway, I mean, we just came out with table talk for referrals, one referral page for the program. You're on the faculty. Billy D's on the faculty. We got Nicole Liederman up in Canada. I got Sharon Gorman on there, the late, great Guy Riekman, Ron and Mary Oberstein sharing some of the best table talk sound bites. But it's how to get the referral. Like the next step is how to generate that referral. And so if you want that, levelupmentoring.rocks. Check it out, table talk for referrals. But one of the things I want to finish with, buddy, was we were talking about golf and the guy that was a little lightheaded, bending over, picking up the golf ball. And you were golfing in Hawaii with your wife, and you were golfing with another couple and having fun and in the sunshine. And it was kind of spur of the moment trip. And, as serious as you are about your chiropractic, you love your fun and it's a really healthy way that you do that. But of course, you're a chiropractor through and through. And what I want the listeners to know is while you're on the golf course with this other couple, you're politely educating on what chiropractic is, what's going on. And at some point in the round of golf, you correct me if I'm wrong, they said, hey, actually, our son is in chiropractic school.
I have to correct you, say it was actually in the bar.
I was going to run it through the filter around the golf course, but there it is.
Actually, after my round of golf, we were in the bar, and I don't know how it came. I had been imbibing regularly during golf, and then we were there after. But somehow I started talking to a local guy about golfing, and then I think somebody asked me. I can't remember what happened, but one of these people said, "Oh, my son's at chiropractic school."
That's right.
And
so you made the effort to follow up with their son because they, after a round of golf, sitting in the bar,
won the lottery.
And you said you just won the lottery.
Yeah.
Like your son who's at chiropractic school needs to come to best practices. You, whether you had a couple of drinks or not, doesn't matter because you followed up. You did what you said, called integrity, and you tracked down the student. He came to the best practices. And the coolest thing was, at the end, we're shaking hands and giving hugs. And literally his words were, Dr. Chestnut, you changed my life.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Because I remember, we know the stats about how many kids fail or in like 50% or whatever. And then I said, well, because, obviously we were kind of in an affluent place or whatever. And I just said, well, your son has an opportunity to have an incredible life, to make an incredible living by helping people. Yeah. And it's like, there's nothing more rewarding than being able to have a great life, but that every cent came from an equal exchange of helping people. I said, that's the joy of it. That's what the money to me represents, how many people I've been able to help. And obviously that resonated with them. And then
totally.
And they said, oh, well, what do you do? Like, I just said, well, you just won the lottery.
It's so true. And he came up, and that was literally the words, and then shooting the text back.
Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you my email address, and I'm going to give your son some materials to read, and I'm going to let him come to a seminar.
Yeah.
So
you gave him a free seat. He came to the seminar. He had done his homework.
I didn't know this, but he had heard about you already. But I just said, I worked with a guy named Dr. Brad Glowaki, and we put on a seminar together. And Brad will help him right from a student all the way through. And I said, I'm telling you, whatever. I don't know what your finances are like. I'm sure they're okay. You're here, but if your son needs to borrow some money to get into that program, get him into it, because it'll be life changing for the rest of his career. And I said, have him contact me, and he did.
Love it. I love it. So I just wanted to throw that on top as we wrap this up is, the work we do, it's impacting chiropractors, whether it's this podcast, the seminar, we're trying to disseminate the information in a palatable way for chiropractors, and it's working. And so the time and effort you've put into this, I really appreciate it. I know you've got another round of golf this afternoon, so I won't keep you any longer. But your genius is always appreciated. And I got to do the victory lap last week in Australia. And I should just echo, the things we share and talk about here, it's a desired impact we've been looking for. And I know you've done those trips with me and we've seen that, but just to reiterate it, it's really moving the needle. And docs, if you are listening, please drop a comment, post this, share this, copy, paste it to a friend. But certainly if you're on YouTube, drop a comment underneath the video. That always helps us get this out there to more chiropractors and chiropractic students. And how dedicated are we to helping chiropractic students? We just did a scholarship for a bunch of students at the last best practices because we knew we wouldn't do one for a while, but also people on a golf course, Chestnut tracked them down to make sure that the student had a free seat. This is coming from the right place. We want the best for the profession. We want the best for the chiropractor because, as we've said in this podcast often, the patient outcomes should equal doctor income. And that's what we call an ethical millionaire. Don't feel bad about that. Feel really good about that. And if we can raise the self-esteem of the chiropractor, then new patients and growth and some of the things we've discussed, those are good things. And you should feel good in delivering your care. So any final thoughts, James? Anything we should have talked about?
Well, I just want to point out that the fact that I was able to say that to that kid, Brad, is because of our relationship. I'm not a coach. Everybody knows that. I mean, I can certainly have some good ideas, give you some good sound bites, and certainly make you feel great about being a chiropractor and teach you how to do evidence-based exams and things. But the reality is how to be successful in practice is not my wheelhouse. I was successful in practice because I was so sure, you know what I mean? But I could have been way more successful had I followed different procedures, right? And so the reason I was able to say that to that kid wasn't just because I knew I was going to make him feel good about being a chiropractor, but I knew I could get him into your student program and make him understand how to make a living at it. And so both are important. It doesn't matter how confident you are or I mean, I know the more confident you are, the better your living will be, but you need procedures. It's a replicable skill. Success leaves clues. And I think that's the most important thing. And so you're always giving me accolades all the time, and I appreciate it. And I know it's sincere, but I just want people to understand, what a great relief it was for me to be able to say, and by the way, there's someone who can give you the step-by-step and start you while you're in school so that you can start running. I mean, that's a huge asset for me to be able to say you won the lottery. I wasn't saying you won the lottery because of me. I was saying you won the lottery because of us. Yeah. And I think that's important to point out.
Appreciate it. No, and look, we've got guys like Eric Russell, full of integrity, that helps students in our system find associate positions if that's what they want to do. And then we've got two models for kids coming out of school if they want to open their own practice, or if you're an associate listening. There's a low budget model, and there's one if you're going to get some bank funding. But there's two ways to open. It could be a low budget shoestring. You get out of your associateship and open your own, or you could do it with some funding. But there's a couple avenues out. I don't like to complicate stuff. Your confidence has to be there. And things like the Elements workshop, I think it's a foregone conclusion at this point. You need to go to that workshop to do a relationship report of findings, not a transaction. It shouldn't be get you into these quick set of visits. I'm thinking years down the track. So that's why it's 12 minutes at the ROF, not 3 minutes, because I want to layer in some of your stuff. I want to get them the science and the research so we can circle back to it and I can deliver on the promise. I can show proof we did this. And I think that's the practice of the future is all this stuff that we're talking about. So Thank you for the compliments and for the vote of confidence in the coaching that we do. And it's been a little while since we had a chance to throw one of these down, but I think we made up for it with not only the length of time in this podcast, but also the quality. This thing is chock full as always. So enjoy your tea time, my brother. Thank you for making some time. And ladies and gentlemen, as you know, there's all kinds of variables in health. There's many factors, but the X factor, it's the Chiro-Factor. Thanks for joining us for another important episode. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey, everybody, if you want more information on future podcasts, go to James's website at innatechoice.com. On that website, you're also going to find some of the science, some of the research, and a ton of great resources to help you become the wellness solution in your practice. If you want to join us for the live seminar, you can come to the Best Practices seminar by also going to innatechoice.com.
So listen, if you want to sign up for this podcast, if you want to get, notifications of when the new one's coming out and all the other great resources that Brad has, go to levelupmentoring.rocks. You can also register for the upcoming best practices seminars there. And again, it's levelupmentoring.rocks.
The Best Practices live seminar will be James, Chestnut, and I teaching side by side. The Chiro-Factor podcast will be dropping complimentary on a monthly basis. You can register for both at innatechoice.com or levelupmentoring.rocks. James and I are thrilled to share cutting-edge current information to help chiropractors get their swagger back. And cheers to those of you listening all the way through to the end. These are the kind of docs we want to help. People who have the best interest for their patients, the best interest in the science for results, and we want to help you with the profitability of your practice as well. We'll see you there at the Best Practices live workshop, or you can listen to us monthly at the Chiro-Factor Podcast.